one of the most influential philosophers of the last 200 years is Friedrich Nietzsche. And people wonder, how do you start to read Nietzsche? It's interesting that Nietzsche himself thought that you didn't have to read him, at least to understand his basic principles, the basic ideas of his thought. At one point in his life, he said there were actually 3 things you could read that would help you to understand, that he found to be an incredible expression of his basic ideas. The first thing was the speeches of Callicles in Plato's Gorgias. The speeches of Callicles in Plato's Gorgias essentially explain the will to power. They explain the way a person might think and act if he wants to understand, explain, and act on the will to power. The second speech that Plato wrote and that Nietzsche said is a great expression of his philosophy, you'll find in the Theaetetus. In the Theaetetus, we find a critique of Plato's commitment to the truth, his commitment to finding the better argument, the one that gets us closer to the truth. And Plato puts in the mouths of one of the sophists of the Theaetetus this critique of this idea, this suspicion that somehow Plato's and Socrates' desire to get us to the truth, that there's something wrong with it. And then the third work that that Nietzsche thought was a wonderful expression of his philosophy was Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. In Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky presents us with a man who is waiting to burst out of the floorboards that he's been hiding under for 20 years. He presents us with a man who is in dialogue with the gentlemen who represent the Enlightenment. They represent utilitarianism. They represent soft socialism. They represent all of the ideas of the Enlightenment that were popular in the 19th century. And this underground man, by the end of Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground, he says to his gentlemen interlocutors, he says to them essentially, you are governed by self-interest, you are governed by power-seeking, but you're afraid to admit it. And so all that I'm going to do in my nihilistic revolutionary activity is I'm going to take off the mask that you are living under. And I'm going to show power-seeking, I'm going to show self-interest for what it truly is. So if you don't have time to read the entire corpus of Friedrich Nietzsche, or maybe you just want to get a different take on his philosophy that also might be a critique, I recommend you read the Theaetetus of Plato, the Gorgias of Plato, and Fyodor Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground. Thank you.